I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gonna feed them. If you're coming for me.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of the Virtual PPL series. Today we're going to take a look at takeoff, climbs and descents. So before we get going, we need to talk about V-speeds and their select airspeeds, and they're usually given another letter after the V, so VR, VY, VX, so on. And we'll have to choose which type of climb we're going to use. So in this case we've got plenty long runway, we don't need to go for a short field takeoff. However, I'm going to do it with one stage of flaps to demonstrate a climb with a takeoff and climb with flaps. So our three main V-speeds, VX is best climb angle, and that's 55 knots in this aircraft. Our best climb rate, VY, is 67 knots, and our normal en route climb doesn't have a V-speed designator, is 75 knots in this aircraft. Our initial climb, so our rotate, is going to be 60, and then we're going to speed up to 65, and then we'll climb from there. When we get to 500 feet AGL, above ground level, we'll then retract our flaps. So first we need to take off. So our power checks are done, we've got our clearances, all checklists are complete, we're ready for takeoff. So if park and brake set, we release it, and then we go full power, then to your right rudder to keep it central down the runway, waiting for that airspeed to come alive. There we go, so airspeed's alive. We'll check our T's and P's, our temperatures and pressures, make sure they're all green, which they are. Wait for 60 knots, gently rotate, 65, initial climb, and then we'll adopt what climb we're going to use. So in this case, I'm going to go for best rate, so VY, so we need 67 knots. 70's fine. And then we're just going to trim for 70 knots. So just maintain our 70 knots and runway heading at this stage. 500 feet above ground level coming up, so we can retract our flaps. The aircraft will nose down a little bit, so we'll gain speed. You just have to nose back up a little bit and retrim for that 70 knots. And then we can complete our after takeoff checks. So in this case, landing light can go off, check our T's and P's, and receive any further clearances that we need to receive. So I'm just going to level off at 1,000 feet here, so 50 to go. Bring down the attitude to straight and level. Let the airspeed build at full power. Bring back the power to cruise. And then we'll trim for our cruise speed at 90 knots. So, our first climb that we'll do from here, we'll climb from roughly 1,000 up to 2,000 feet, and we will use the best climb angle this time, so BX. There's two acronyms to remember. There's PAT, PAT, and APT. PAT stands for Power Attitude Trim. APT stands for Attitude Power Trim, and we'll use these throughout this flight. So to enter our first climb, which is our best angle, VX, we need 55 knots. We're going to use PAT, so full power, select the attitude, so nose up, 10-15 degrees initially, wait for our airspeed to come down to 55 knots for our best angle of climb. You might need to nose up just a little bit more just to bring that speed back. Make sure you're keeping it level and on your selected heading, unless you're doing a climbing turn. And then once you have that 55 knots, you then retrim. So we'll climb up to 2,000 feet, and then we'll level off again. So on the level off, we're going to use APT. T. So we'll wait for, there's 100 to go, we'll wait for 50, there's 50 to go, so we'll select our attitude nice and gently. There's our straight and level attitude. Next is power, but we're not going to touch the power just yet because we've got a really low airspeed, so we wanted to build our airspeed first whilst maintaining level flight. Let it come back to where it was at cruise, or where you want it to be. Once you're there, you can bring back the power to cruise, and then you can retrim. Our next climb is the en route climb, and this is typically used during your flight. So in aviation, time really is money. It's very expensive. You want to get to your destination as quick as possible. So to maintain your progress in your flight, you can use the en route climb, and it's a slightly faster airspeed, so you're still tracking across the ground with a higher ground speed, but you're still getting your climb performance as well. Your climb performance will be a bit less than the other two climbs, but it's still a decent enough climb. So to enter an en route climb, we use PAT again, so PAT, power, attitude, trim. So full power, the V speed we're looking for is 75 knots. So just nose up 10 degrees or so. Let the speed come back to 75 knots. Once you've got it, you can just let the nose come down a little bit, like so, and then just retrim for 75 knots, and there we go. We have an hour en route climb. So we still got a fairly decent ground speed, and we've still got a climb speed of nearly 1,000 feet per minute, so it's still very good climb speed. In terms of trimming, the best way I can explain how to trim correctly, because if you get it right, it really does make your life so much easier and the plane does all the work. You want to lighten the load on your control column. So the way I do it is I gently, obviously I'm over exaggerating here so you can see it, but I gently pull back or push down, depending on how I'm trimming, to find out if I need to trim more. So in this example, let's say I want to trim nose down. We'll just keep the climb going while I demonstrate this. I will push the nose down, select our attitude of straight and level, and I can see there that if I let go of the column, it wants to pitch back up. So I'll just push back down again nice and gently. I'll trim forward a little bit, and then I'll let go again. It still wants to climb, so a bit more forward trim and let go again. And you can see that climb, that pitching up has really slowed down now. And I just do it again. And I just keep repeating that until I get that trim that I'm looking for. So now I'm trimmed straight and level. Just confirm that by checking your instruments. Your altimeter is your main one there. Make sure that it isn't increasing or decreasing. The VSI, as in previous episodes, there is lag on that, so you can't use it as a direct indicator of if you're well trimmed, basically, if you're straight and level. But anyway, so I stopped our climb. Now we need to use APT. So I've done the attitude bit, I've selected our cruise attitude, and now we're going to select our power because we're already above our cruise power here. Bring it back 2300 RPM in this case. And then once I got our airspeed again, I'll then retrim for cruise. So for small deviations in altitude, you can just pull the nose up a little bit. It will reduce your airspeed slightly, but you've only got 100 feet or something. Just gently bring that 100 feet back. And the same if you want to reduce your altitude by 100 feet or so, you can just pitch down just a little bit to regain that altitude that you're looking for. No need to retrim because you've already set the trim for cruise, so once you've got the altitude you're looking for, you can just let it return back to the way you had it configured with the trim, and it should just stay there. So for our descents, you have two choices when it comes to descending. You can descend at your cruise speed or faster if the conditions allow for it, provided you don't exceed VNE, which is the red line past the yellow arc. Or you can adopt an approach speed. It all depends on where you are in your flight. So obviously if you're getting close to the airfield and you need to start approach, then you can adopt an airspeed, and that'll be your approach descent. The first one we'll look at is just a non-route descent. So we need to lose a little bit of altitude for whatever reason as part of our flight plan, or there's airspace coming up and we've still got a significant amount of way to go in our flight. So again, we're going to use PAT and APT for our descents, and we're going to descend from 2,800 feet down to 2,000 feet, and we're going to do it at cruise speed. So the first thing we need to do is we'll pull our carby out, and then we'll reduce our throttle to about 1500 RPM, and just let the nose come down by itself, and that will maintain your cruise speed. If the rate of descent is excessive, like now, so approaching 2,000 feet per minute, just add a bit of power, and you'll see the nose will pitch it back up again. But we'll maintain roughly cruise power by doing this. You don't need to retrim. The reason why we use carb is to stop carburetor icing, which is the chance of it happening is higher when you use a lower power setting. So that's why we need to use the carb. So we're going to level off at 2,000 feet now. So the first thing we need to do is power. Select our attitude. Bring back the power to cruise, and then retrim. You shouldn't really need to retrim if you just used your normal cruise speed without trimming to descend. They just use the engine power instead, the power setting. And now you need to get rid of your carb heat, as that is unfiltered air, and it isn't good for the engine. Basically, you only need to use that when you need to use it. It also degrades your engine performance. You'll have less power because of the hot air. So the next descent is an approach descent, and this is where we need to select an airspeed and possibly even flaps. So in this case, I'm going to go for a 80 knot descent, and the first thing to do is, again, bring our carb out, reduce the power. This time I'm going to keep the attitude. I'm not going to let the nose dip until it gets to 80. Once it's got to 80, I'll let the nose dip, and then we'll just let the nose come down until we've got 80 knots. Once we've got it, we'll maintain it with either back pressure or forward pressure, whatever we need, and then I'll trim for that airspeed. As you can see, we've got a 500-600 feet per minute vertical descent, and we're maintaining roughly our 80 knots. And to exit this climb is exactly the same before. We'll get rid of our carb heat, we'll apply our power, wait for speed to build, adopt the attitude, bring back the power, and then retrim for our cruise speed. As we went through takeoff and climbs and descents, we'll go through our first emergency procedure, which is a simulated fan stop. So that is when the engine quits, basically on takeoff. It's a really fundamental emergency procedure to learn, what you need to do, how you need to act. The engine's more likely to quit in high load situations such as takeoff and climbs, even in descents, due to carburetor icing. Typically in straight and level flight, the engine is happy just sitting there away. You know, it'll keep running and running and running. You do get the occasions where they they do like to just quit. But typically, takeoffs is where it happens, and it's when you're most vulnerable, because usually you're at low altitude. So we'll take a look at that now. So our first emergency procedure, which is engine failure immediately after takeoff. There is quite a lengthy checklist that needs to be followed, and you don't always get the time, so you really have to memorize it. It comes down to some basics, such as best glide speed, which in this case is 65 knots, and then choosing where you're going to land. All depends on how much time you've got. If it's died after 100 feet and you've got plenty of runway, you can make the runway, try and land there. But you might not have a chance to go through your checklist. If you've got a couple of 100 feet of ground, above the ground, you might be able to get through the checklist, but there's probably no time for attempting a restart, so I probably wouldn't go ahead with that. So the checklist is as follows. We need to adopt our best glide, which is 65 knots. We need to do that immediately, and that allows us to stay airborne for longer. Then we need to select our landing site. That needs to be a suitable area, so ideally not a lake or a road or a building, obviously, but a field, and ideally needs to be into wind. Again, it all depends on how much time you've got, how high above the ground you are, whether you can make that turn or not. Next, you need to transmit your mayday call, which goes along the lines of something like this, which is mayday, 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 your call sign, nature of the emergency, so engine failure, and what you're going to do, so landing straight ahead, and if you've got time, include things like persons on board, POB, and go ahead and carry on with the checklist. Next step is mixture goes to idle cutoff, fuel selector goes to off, ignition switch goes to off, flaps as required. In this aircraft they are electrically driven, so you need to sort your flaps before you continue with the checklist, because the next stage of the checklist is master switch goes off. Then you brief your passengers, and then you unlatch the cabin doors, and that's just in case the airframe becomes bent or damaged in the landing, and so you can still get out. But what we'll do is we'll start a normal takeoff, and I will stop the engine using the mixture. So in the checklist my mixture will already be at cutoff, and then we'll proceed with the checklist. I'll do that at about 300 feet. We should be near the end of the runway there, and so I will have to make an off-airport landing. There is also a good memory aid that you can use, which is A, B, C, D, E, and that is A for airspeed, B for best glide, C for checklist, D for declare an emergency, and E for execute the landing. Let's go ahead and take off. Plenty of right rudder. Watching for that airspeed to come alive. There we go, airspeed's alive. T's P's are in the green. Maintaining center line. Waiting for our VR. And there we go. Okay, so we'll maintain our runway heading. Keep our climb going. And then we'll wait for about 300 feet. And I'll kill the engine using the mixture. Okay, so engine's gone. Nose down. Get that 65 knots straight away. Need to choose a landing site, so it's going to be directly in front of us in this case. We'll transmit our mayday call. Mixture's already idle. Ignition switch is off. Flaps. We start a stage of flaps. Another stage of flaps. Master switch can go off. Brief the passengers. And unlatch the doors. And then make the landing. And there we go. We survived. Really important that we remember three things: aviate, navigate, communicate. Let's fly the plane, navigate, and then talk to ATC, in that order, always. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like, and if you want to see more in the series, please hit subscribe. Thank you very much.